Imagine waking to a sky darkened not by clouds, but by something far more overwhelming. German civilians faced relentless destruction, watched their cities transform overnight, and realized their leaders had underestimated what was coming. What they saw in the skies changed everything they believed. The numbers behind the missions revealed an impossible truth. One moment made denial completely impossible, and what happened next would force an entire nation to confront reality. Before we dive, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, what time it is for you right now. Area bombing. In March 1942, something changed in the skies over Germany. The British Royal Air Force began a new strategy called area bombing. Instead of hitting just factories or military bases, they targeted entire cities. The raid on Lübeck was just the beginning. Soon, cities like Hamburg and Dresden faced waves of bombers that seemed endless. The sheer number of aircraft filling the sky was unlike anything German civilians had ever seen. Thousands of bombs fell in single nights, creating firestorms that consumed entire neighborhoods. The destruction was so vast, so complete, that people began to realize something terrifying. The Allies could produce more bombs, more planes, and more missions than Germany could ever defend against. This wasn't just a military operation, it was industrial power on a scale that felt impossible, and it was only going to get worse. What civilians didn't know yet was how the daytime raids would complete the picture. But the night raids were only half the story. Daylight precision bombing. While British bombers struck at night, American forces took a different approach during the day. The USAAFs launched daylight precision bombing missions, targeting the heart of Germany's industrial machine. Ball-bearing factories, oil plants, and critical infrastructure became their focus. German civilians watched as formations of American bombers flew overhead in broad daylight, protected by fighter escorts. The message was clear: the Allies controlled the skies completely. These weren't random attacks, they were calculated strikes, designed to cripple Germany's ability to fight back. Factories that took years to build were destroyed in hours. The oil needed to fuel tanks and planes was cut off at the source. For the first time, ordinary Germans began to understand that their country couldn't match this level of coordination and production. The war machine they had been told was unstoppable was being systematically taken apart. But the true scale of Allied superiority would become even clearer in 1944, and then something shifted that made resistance feel pointless. Visible air superiority. By 1944, the transformation was complete. Allied aircraft filled German skies without opposition. Citizens looked up and saw endless streams of bombers, escorted by fighters, flying wherever they wanted. German planes were rarely seen anymore. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, had been overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Soldiers returning home on leave brought stories that crushed morale further. They described the scale of destruction in other cities, the hopelessness of fighting an enemy with unlimited resources. Reports spread of entire industrial regions reduced to rubble. The contrast was undeniable. While Germany struggled to produce enough fuel and ammunition, the Allies seemed to have endless supplies. Every raid reinforced the same harsh truth: Germany's industrial capacity couldn't compete. The nation that had started the war with confidence now faced an opponent whose production lines never stopped. And this was still just the beginning of what civilians would witness. The biggest revelation was yet to come. Because once the fighting stopped, the real shock arrived. Overwhelming presence. When Allied forces entered Germany in 1945, the physical reality became impossible to ignore. Massive columns of troops, tanks, trucks, and equipment rolled across the country for days. German civilians stood by roadsides, watching in stunned silence as the parade of military might continued without end. Towns that had never seen foreign soldiers were suddenly filled with them. The logistical coordination required to move, feed, and supply such vast armies was beyond anything most Germans had imagined possible. Every piece of equipment, every uniform, every ration told the same story. The Allies had built an industrial machine so powerful that Germany never stood a chance. This wasn't just a military occupation, it was a demonstration of economic and industrial strength that shattered any remaining illusions about the war. But there was another confrontation coming that would be even harder to face. And what Allied commanders forced civilians to see next changed everything. Forced confrontations with atrocities. In April 1945, Allied commanders made a decision that would haunt German civilians forever. They ordered residents from nearby towns to walk through the concentration camps that had been hidden in their countryside. Places like Buchenwald were opened, and locals were forced to witness what had been done in their country's name. The scenes were devastating. Many civilians claimed they had no knowledge of what happened in these places. The confrontations were deliberate, designed to make denial impossible. This wasn't about industrial might in the traditional sense, but it was about power of a different kind, the power to force a nation to face the truth about the regime they had supported. The walks through the camps became a turning point in how Germans understood the war. It connected the destruction of their cities to the moral destruction of their nation. The Allies weren't just militarily superior, they represented a different set of values. And soon, they would demonstrate their industrial power in an entirely new way, through an economic plan that would reshape an entire continent. The Marshall Plan and economic contrast. After the initial occupation, something unexpected happened. Instead of permanent punishment, the Western Allies launched the Marshall Plan, a massive economic recovery program. Billions of dollars in aid flowed into Western Germany to rebuild infrastructure, factories, and cities. This wasn't immediate, and early occupation policies had been much harsher. There had even been plans, like the Morgenthau Plan, to turn Germany into a largely agricultural nation. But the Marshall Plan revealed something more powerful than bombs or tanks: the industrial and economic capacity to rebuild an entire region while simultaneously supporting their own economies. For German civilians, the contrast was striking. The nation that had destroyed their cities was now helping rebuild them with resources that seemed endless. It demonstrated a level of wealth and production capability that made Germany's wartime industrial efforts look small by comparison. This wasn't just about winning a war, it was about reshaping the future. And it left one final, undeniable lesson. A lesson that would define the post-war world. The undeniable reality. By the end of 1945, no German civilian could deny what they had witnessed. The relentless bombing campaigns had shown the Allies could strike anywhere, anytime, with overwhelming force. The occupation demonstrated logistical mastery on a continental scale. The economic recovery efforts proved industrial capacity beyond imagination. Every phase of Allied involvement, from destruction to reconstruction, reinforced the same truth. Germany had faced an opponent whose resources, coordination, and production capabilities were simply unmatched. The psychological impact was profound. A nation that had been told it was destined to dominate Europe had been systematically outproduced, outfought, and ultimately rebuilt by the very forces it had tried to conquer. The scale of Allied industrial might wasn't just about numbers or technology, it was about a fundamentally different approach to war and peace. And that realization changed how an entire generation understood power, conflict, and their place in the world. The skies had taught them a lesson they would never forget, and history would never be the same. The transformation German civilians witnessed between 1942 and 1945 redefined their understanding of industrial power. From the darkened skies filled with endless bombers to the vast armies that occupied their land, every moment revealed a truth they couldn't escape. The Allied industrial machine didn't just win battles, it reshaped an entire nation's future. This was power on a scale the world had never seen before, and its impact would echo through generations to come.